Hi, I'm Corey. Welcome to Creating with Scraps and episode 6 of the Scrap Buster Build an Idea book. All right, today's projects are two of my absolute favorites, scrap cards and scrap pads. And both of these I've done videos on before, but in the interest of continuing what we're doing, I will show you and I'll give you some tips or ideas. All right, scrap cards are just this. They're using little bits of scraps, offcuts, the tiny little itty bitty thin strips that we usually throw away. Well, I use these and I lay them onto card, whether it's vertical or horizontal. I'll lay them on blank cards and I glue them in place. And then I put usually a die cut on top. You can do a tag and a flower. You can do a variety of things. But I have found that, here, I'll grab a couple pieces so I can show you what I mean. If I use a bigger piece like this on one of these cards, what happens is you lose the scrap effect. You lose the background. So when I'm doing these, I like to use the really thin die cuts because you get to see the visual behind it. You can use small little bits like these, and that would work just fine. But again, it just gives you a different aesthetic, which is why I use the die cuts. And someone asked about, I'm not going to show you how to do this simply because I have a whole video showing how to do it. And you just take the little bit of scraps and you glue them down in, a random pattern to make what you like in the size that you want. And then you glue a die cut on top. And here's one that's kind of completed. It's kind of drying right now, but you can see what I mean. It's just the scraps show behind and then a die cut on top. Now, someone asked me about these die cuts. The die cuts that I've got here, you've seen me do, where I cut it a couple different times using, like here it's coffee dyed tracing paper, that's some Seth After vintage beeswax. This is green, and then I cut them and piece them together. And I do that with the larger die cuts. For the smaller ones, like this is a lot of times what I'll use for the minis or the small. It's the Tim Holtz, I don't know, Wildflowers or something. It's got the mason jars on it, because these are much smaller dies and they'll work, the pieces work with the smaller size journals. But I don't cut them out and piece them together. What I do with these is I'll cut them in, well, you can see, there's the ink. I cut them in coffee dyed paper, cardstock, and then I will paint them. And when I say I paint them, I am absolutely no watercolor specialist or anything. I'll use the Tim Holtz Distress ink, and you can use the oxides, but I just like the way the inks work a little better. And my high-tech method is I smush this down on my glass mat, right? And then I use this really old Judikins water brush pen. And they have more now, but this one's probably, I don't know, 20, 25 years old. And then I rub the ink around with this and then I brush it on. I mean, it's literally that simple. And I'll do it in whichever colors I want. And it's super quick and it's fun. So I'll die cut a whole bunch of these and then I'll paint a whole bunch of these at once. Or, on the same sitting. And it doesn't take long at all. And like I said, it's kind of fun. And then here I came back in with the Seth After vintage beeswax to make those brown centers, just because I like the way it looks. Okay. And then, whatever colors you want to do, whatever colors you need for your project. And again, this is a great, great way to use scraps. When you've got little bits of leftover die cut or cardstock, you just make a bunch of these little itty bitty die cuts. And then sometimes I'll put like glossy accents on it, or Nouveau Crystal Glaze, or Wink of Stella, just to give it a little bit more shimmer and sparkle. And then I can, when I know what I'm needing to do, I'll come in and I just lay them down like this. Now, another thing I use these for, it's kind of on an off topic, but I use these for my little itty bitty clusters for these small books. I love using these for this too. And I'll do this and then I'll put like maybe a tiny little label on there and call that good, finish it off. Maybe a brad or two because I really like brads. So scrap cards, I use the die cuts with them, but basically it's the idea of using these bases to make scraps. Okay. Scrap. Oh, no, Corey, don't do that. This was still wet. Let me move that aside. Okay, scrap cards done. Move to the side. The next one that I talked about is scrap pads. And I got this idea from Tracy Fox, who said she got it from someone who got it from someone. And, if you give a mouse a cookie tangent thing. All right. And what are scrap pads? Oh, here we go. A scrap pad is basically just bits of scrap paper sewn or glued or stapled together and to make a pad. And the idea is that when you're doing your journaling or when you're doing your projects or something, you can tear out little bits of what you need to decorate pages. You've seen me often put little envelopes or things with little bits of embellishments. So as you're doing your journaling, you can add a little bit to it. Well, that's what this scrap paper is for. You know, it can be all different sizes and lengths. You can make it more uniform, or you can make it really random like this. And the last time I shared this, so this one's a double-sided one with a pocket and back, and this one's really big. It's a long one to go over a big one, a big page. And I've got, it was in my Flip, Slaps, and Folds idea book. And then I used just a paper clip to hold it in place, right on the top of my page. And last time I did it, somebody asked, or one of the questions that I have written down to answer is, well, how do you actually use those in a journal? And so I pulled up this journal, which we've seen before, and marked the pages where you can see where I use a scrap pad. See, here is just a plain old scrap bag. Big page, big journaling card, and I've got a scrap pad behind it. Okay, again, ways to just pull off little bits and put them on your pages. So like right in here on this one, there's places to journal on the inside. Oh, there's a journaling pad. So there's places to journal on the inside, and then I can use that scrap paper to add and decorate those pages. And let's see, here it is again. Okay, so this one is one of our Flips, Flaps, and Folds. But when you open it up, you see there is another scrap pad. Okay. And again, different sizes, different kinds of paper, different offcuts, different widths. They don't all have to be the same, but it's, you know, it's a handy way to use it in your journal. And then we did one, whoa, sorry, there's way too much stuff in here that I haven't put away yet. In one of the most recent videos, this one, okay, the one that was inspired by Mom, Carrie Fellow's mom. So we did these little pocket thing, and in here, there is also a scrap pad, again, kind of random. There's this cool wood paper and some packing materials and all just kind of cool stuff. So scrap pads in use, you see them, and they actually do go inside journals. And the way I do scrap pads, there's actually two different ways that I do it, depending on what the need is. For these little itty bitty journals, what I'm doing is I'm making the scrap pads double-sided so that I can use magnets. And I've got one kind of prepped here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So it's going to go over the edge of my page, right? Top to bottom, and then the scrap pad will be on one side, and then I usually put a pocket or some other belly band or something on the other side. Like here, this happens to be a pocket, right? Okay. And then it'll go over the page. But on these, I put a magnet so that it stays in the page and it stays closed. Simply because of the size, there isn't a sufficient amount of weight to hold it in the page. Now, of course, I could still use a paper clip. I probably have one around here somewhere. A little paper clip. Oh, here we go. I could use a paper clip to hold it in the journal, right? But I could also, that's an option, but I can also use the magnets, and I'll show you how I do that. All right, so I've got a scrap of cardstock, right? In this case, it's probably the 3x4 rectangles that we got from Tim Holtz. No, this is a 2-inch section. Cut it, folded it over, and I've grabbed my scrap papers. Now, most of the time, I will just get them to width. I don't want this was about a 2-inch pad, so I wanted to make sure that all of my papers fit a 2-inch pad. And just like this, okay? And yes, it's too long. You can see that. Then what I do is I open this up, and I make sure it's straight. And then I'll come in and I'll clip it. I use the quilting clips. And then I'll go on my machine, and I often use a zigzag for this. Well, see, it's not straight, so I would straighten it before I would sew it. I would use a zigzag up at the top here. All right. And then once it's done and it's in place and I know everything's, then I'll tear it so that it's the right dimension. I'll just cut straight across or tear so that all my little pieces fit on the back of there. And the reason I do it this way is, rather than just leaving this paper loose in the back, is because I'm going to put a magnet on here. Now, I've shown you this before, the magnets before, but here they are in use. And they're the basic gray, 5/8 inch diameter, one blah, 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 magnets. And these guys are really strong. And they come packaged with a positive and a negative, so you know that you're putting them the right sides together, or you're using the right magnets. And the signs with the positive and negative are where the adhesive is. So you're guaranteed you're doing it fairly or mostly correct. My personal preference, I put it towards the middle and towards the bottom, but not at the bottom. And I do that for a couple reasons. So here I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to glue it in the middle towards the bottom, but not at the bottom. And I'm going to, I moved it off to the side. That's okay. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'll put it down here like this. And then I'll come in with just a scrap. And I use cardstock for this because these magnets are strong. If I were using regular, okay, this hasn't clogged all day. If I were using regular paper, sorry guys, I was just going to brag on this glue, how it hasn't clogged on me at all. And here it is. I must have left it off too long and it's clogged. Okay, not going to work. All right, plan B. I actually, that's the first time I've had that reptile glue that somebody recommended clog. It has, I mean, but it's my fault. I left that thing off for a long time. But I really like it because it's a little thinner than art glitter glue, and it is, it generally doesn't clog as much, and it gives me a little more wiggle room. So I will glue this piece on top of and over, and then I'll use my little binder clips to hold this in place until it dries. These aren't binder clips, I lied. These are quilter's clips or some other kind of clips, but you can buy them at the quilt store. Or you can steal them from your mom. Excuse me, you don't steal from mama. Permanently borrow. Okay, so like that. And you see I didn't put it down for, dang nabbit. Okay, this is what happens when I try to do this on the go. You have a little more wiggle room. See what I told? Oh, this is art glitter glue, but that's okay. I'm going to move it up a little bit more. And the reason is I want to make sure that the magnet is covered on each side by the paper. I don't want the magnet peeking out. I want to make sure it's covered all the way around. Okay, I'm making a hot mess of this, only because I'm showing you. All right, like this. So I've got it there. Then what I do is I take the adhesive off the back of this magnet, or I'll start to take the adhesive off the back of this magnet, and I'll put it here. And notice how it just went exactly where it wanted to go. I glue this down first so that I can actually get these things apart. Okay, and then I'll put it down so that I know they're going to match up, right? And then I've got that piece of paper in there that's going to help me get my magnet off. Okay, see, like this. Now I can do the same thing. I'll come in, and normally, honestly, I wonder what I did. Normally what I do is instead of putting the glue on the paper, I'll put the glue around the magnet. I think having my glue clogged kind of threw me off for a little bit. So I'll put it around like this to make sure I get it exactly where I want it. Now this is going to be the inside that's on the pages, so it's not really going to show. So not a big deal. And then I'll press it down. And it doesn't take long to dry at all, but I just want to make sure I get a good, strong bond. All right. Now remember, I've already put my pocket on here, and where allegedly I've already sewn this piece on. I do those before I put the magnets on because the magnets are drawn to each other, and I want everything done before these magnets start becoming friends. All right. And then I just put it over. Let me grab a piece of tape. There we go. I just put it over the top of my page, and it's held in place because of those nice strong magnets. The profile, can you see? It's really thin. These are thin magnets, but the hold is nice and strong, and I don't have to have a paper clip if I don't want to. All right, so that is one method, the magnet method. Now, you may not have magnets, or you may not want to use magnets. So there's always a plan B. And here is plan B. Now, I must have had a daffodil in there. I pre-sewed this one just for the sake of speed and ease. And what I do here is an offcut of a die cut, and I put an offcut of cardstock. And I already glued a pocket on the back because I like pockets. And then you'll see here, it's just one strip, and I just scored about, I don't know, half an inch maybe, 3/4 of an inch, I guess. Scored it and folded it over. And then what I'm going to do is put my scrap pad in here and hold it down. And I do it this way. I pre-sew it like that just because it's so stinking easy. I don't worry as much about, you know, the paper wiggling around, and it takes seconds to do. And then I'll use these clips again to hold it in place while I go to my machine and sew it. And then I will just either use a zigzag stitch or I'll sew a straight stitch here. Okay, the disadvantage and advantage of this is, one, I'm just going to glue it just for the sake of speed so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, a little bit of glue. You can always glue, right? I generally don't put it all the way up to the very top at the fold because I don't want it to be too bulky, right? Excuse me. So I'll fold it over like this. But you see here, I've just got my regular thin paper, so I can't really use a magnet on this. It's not strong enough. The magnet will tear it, guaranteed. So this is where I would, again, put it over the top of my paper, right? I've got a pocket on this side, and I can do a hangover pocket piece on that. And I've got the scrap pad on this side, and this is where I'd come in with my paper clip, and the paper clip will hold it in place. So it just depends on what look you want, how much paper you've got, and what materials you've got. All right, next question I've had is the top page. A lot of times what you'll see me do on the top page is I will stamp an image. Let me just grab a couple pens. And the way I do that is, you can use ink pads, of course, but a lot of times I will just use markers in whatever color scheme I'm working in. And these are Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. I very rarely use Copics and all of the others, even though I've got them, simply because I'm not much of a colorer, and these work great for me. So what I do is I come in, and I've used this one enough that I know, a simple stamp. This is a flowery, leafy stamp, but I'll come in. Let's see, maybe I should put the ink where there's a stem. So I'll color it up like this with my brush, and then I'll come in with the other color, and you can see I'm not very careful with this. Come in with the other color and color the flowers. All right. And then I normally do this before I sew it in case I really mess it up. I'll huff on it to make sure it's still damp. We used to do that back in the day. And then I'll stamp. Okay, and that is my stamped. And then a lot of times I'll take a little bit of washi and put it on like it's almost like it's tied here. And then my stamp pad is done, and I will come in and tear the bottoms so that they match, or that they are not longer than the page, or I can cut them, but they can be raggedy. That's just the nature of this beast. And that's pretty much all there is to a stamp pad. Just kind of a handy little option. Okay, so that's stamp cards, scrap cards, and stamp pads, and I showed you how I go about doing those and decorating those. And another question I had was scrap clusters in different sizes. Somebody asked how I come up with them. Well, really, I just don't. I just grab bits and pieces, sometimes even off the floor, and lace, and I just kind of throw them together. And, you know, instead of throwing the bits into my bin, I'll toss them in here. Like, oh, that's a great bit for a scrap cluster, a great bit. And little bits of lace. And there's no rhyme, no reason. I don't plan it out. I just kind of do them. And then again, I'll come in later on with my 3-step process, and I'll grab a die cut or a label or whatever I'm wanting to use. Okay, I don't really love that together, so I wouldn't do it. But I kind of like that one, so maybe I would do that. Or maybe I'd use a flower card, or here we go. Here's a cool stamp. So maybe I would use this cool stamp to do my final step or something. But that's, somebody had asked about those, and so there you go. I just keep those on hand. Another question I got was paper clips. Do I have any more paper clips? Do I have any different kinds? What kinds was I talking about? This is the video we did with, I showed you how to make these paper clips with the tuck spot, and it was inspired by Attic Lane, Down Attic Lane, On Attic Lane, something like that. So there's our video on these. So there's a paper clip. And then here's another one of those hanging paper clips. This is simple. It's just a label, a butterfly, and a single tag. Actually, I don't even think this is a tag. I think this is an offcut of paper. And again, with the hanging sari silk there. This is another paper clip. This is just really cool handmade paper from my friend Laura. And I put a pocket in there with a journaling spot, right? Just an opening journaling card, little pocket. Folded it over, sewed it, and put a paper, just a simple little paper clip. All this is a paper clip with a brad, and I just put it on the top. And because I've done it this way, I can just tuck this right onto the top of my page. So these are even separate. This is just a little bit longer. I think that's what, maybe a 3-inch paper clip. So, you know, there's a paper clip, and this is, you can just make toppers for your paper clips if you want to. Have them ready to go. And then this one is just a little book. It's a paper clip on the back, right? And it's just a little itty bitty book because, you know, sometimes you just need a little book. So there you go on that. Some more paper clips and how they're used, more clusters. Last question I got was how I personalize a journal. What do you mean by personalizing them? Are the journals done? Well, all the journals that I made and sold recently are this 3x4 Tim Holtz paper rectangle, right? And all of the journals are essentially done, and by that I mean they have, the frame is done, there's paper, and there are various pockets, tucks, flips, whatever on each page. But you can see they're kind of naked. So the pieces are in place, but none of the individuality that makes it like there's no embellishment here, and there's no little tag or tuck or card, and I haven't closed this down or decorated the top or put glassine bags, and you know, this envelope, I haven't put anything in it, and I haven't put the writing place here or whatever I'm going to add to it. So the journals are all essentially in this, a various form of this, but what I do, it takes probably, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 hours, just depending on the book. I go in and I add things, initials and ephemera and bits with lace and such, depending on how much lace the person likes, and charms and beads and just stuff to make it more individual and personalized. So that's what I'm talking about. Like here, I don't have the scrap pad yet, and I don't have an envelope, and I haven't put any layers of things. So this is the stage that the ones that aren't done, they're at. Okay, long video. I hope I answered all the questions that I had. And if not, just leave a comment in the box below and I will try to answer it on the next go round. Thank you for watching and happy creating.